Well, last time I was talking on the fact that if you have a lazy worker, that lazy worker is not adding more value to the commodity. Rather, the fact that the worker is lazy means that that worker is his hourly labor time is worth less in socially equivalent labor time. So, for example, in case of Josh, his one labor time is worth 30 minutes. And if a worker is very productive, in that case, her labor time is worth more than socially equivalent one socially equivalent labor time. For example, in case of Mary, her one labor time, 1 hour labor time is equal to 2 hour socially equivalent labor time. But note that these differences might not only are created when there is an effort difference between Mary and Josh. Of course, their ability might also be different, and that's a big question. I mean, that's a big question in my opinion that is lacking in both all economic schools. I mean, the way different factors are playing part in productivity of individuals. I mean, independent of machinery and physical equipment. The heterogeneity of the labor power is something that needs to be tackled with, in my opinion, which is not done, in my opinion, sufficiently. But of course, the ability differences might play a part. Well, Josh might be working in a sector where he has more skills. Mary might no skills. Maybe Josh could be socially more productive in social sense if he becomes a doctor. And Mary maybe is in a sector where she's more productive and more skills. So those are the ways we can compare these two people in terms of, I mean, how their abilities come into the picture when we are talking on their relative productivity. But another thing that can take part in determining the labor time, that is, I mean, the value that is added by the workers, is the machinery that is used. And for that, I have a third person called Kate. And the effect of machinery can be looked upon in two different ways. First, we might assume we have a society where there is no machine at all. So, let's assume, for example, we have a society without woodcutters. In that case, labor time is expected to be higher. Since you don't have woodcutter, you need more time to produce the table. Of course, you might have hammer, saw, things like that. But I assume they also don't exist. And without any significant machine or tool, maybe, let's assume you produce the table in 10 hours. Those things can change. I mean, you can add and subtract different, you can see different possibilities. We use the same nail and wood. Since we produce the same table physically, they will use the same nail and wood. So 5 labor hour will go to that. But the time transferred from the woodcutter and electricity doesn't exist. In that case, exchange value is equal to 15 labor hours. We assume this economic system is isolated from the other system. Only then this exists. Only then we can say, I mean, there's an isolation between this system and the other system. Only then we can say, I mean, this society without woodcutter will have a different exchange value, which is 15 labor hours basically. What happens if this isolation is removed? If we have no more isolation, in that case, exchange value of this woodcutter will be socially equivalent. It will be equal to the its social equivalent value. So it will fall to 8. Because I mean, here I'm assuming most producers, when they afford, they buy woodcutter, since I mean by doing that they can produce the table more cheaply. But there are one or two producers which cannot afford the woodcutter and they still have the old method. So for them, the exchange value of the table they produce is still equal to 8 labor hour. So in this 10 labor hour, actual value they add to the table is they add from this, to this 5 labor hour. Well, they start with 5 labor hour nail, worth nail and wood, and they add 3 labor hour in the end. So their 10 labor hour is worth 3 labor hours. So their 1 labor hour is worth 0.3 labor hours, or 18 minutes basically. So their 1 labor hour is worth 18 minutes of socially equivalent labor time. And this is not because they are lazy, this is because they cannot afford the latest technology. Well, what happens if, what can we say about the relative easiness or difficulty of the different sectors? I mean, can we say all workers in a sector, in particular sector or profession, are very lazy, or all workers in a particular profession or sector are really very productive? Well, if this is so, and if there is free mobility between those different sectors for workers, in that case, workers will move to the sector where they are more comfortable. So in the end, basically, we might assume the equivalent labor power. I mean, well, we must say that labor has different dimension, except in addition to time. For example, the easiness or comfort level of the work done might also be an important factor. Or I don't know, the risks that are involved might be another factor. The actual power we need physical power we need to carry maybe certain items might be also important. The time, whether we are working at night or day, might be also important. But in the end, the more intense labor power, let me say, if you use more intense labor power at the same time, but spend the same labor time, then our labor time might be, my labor time might be more valuable than the other person's labor time at certain sector or at certain profession. But personally, I believe, and it is done in economics in general, in Marxian economics and the mainstream economics also, taking labor, well, the intensity of the labor more or less same in the calculations where we are looking at the overall characteristics of the economic system and overall way a company is functioning, is safe, at least at the level of the theories and models we are looking for. But still, of course, this intensity, different intensity levels of the labor is something that is worth discovering. And I think that's something that is lacking in economics basically. Mainstream economics, there is this the skilled labor and unskilled labor difference, but still a very vague difference where this intensity is not studied in much detail. At different sectors, we assume the intensity of the labor power is the same, which is, as I said, in mainstream economics, it's also more or less assumed it's the same way. But I will have a brief discussion on this intensity of the labor power, or labor power, or how can we compare different labor performed in different sectors and different professions. Basically, this would be something it is worth discussing, and we will spend some time in discussing it. There's actually a class discussion on this topic also, and I will briefly talk on it. Now, this the fact that lacking the latest technology machines is actually reducing labor power of equally hardworking person will be very important in especially next lecture. But for now, we will look to something else. We will look to the now use value. As I said before, in order to be sold, commodities need to be useful. Production should be increased usefulness of the commodities for at least for some. So if for everyone, the plastics I make this pan from are more valuable than the pan itself, more useful than the pan itself, in that case, I mean, anyone who got this pan will just assemble it and produce those plastics. I mean, since those plastics are more useful for them. In that case, I mean, no one who wants to make a profit will produce this pan. So I can be confident. I mean, if no use value is added, the pan won't be produced. Well, and I have seen that, I mean, if it is not worth for me to produce this pan, I won't produce this pan. And in that, whether it is worth or not determined by the cost and price of this pan. So, so price should be high enough to cover, to get me sufficient profit at the cost level. And cost level is determined mainly by the production system. Well, what about use value? Use value is, according to Marx, something individual, something done at the personal level. So every person, when they buy the pen, they act individually. They individually decide how useful this pen is for them, or how whether it is useful or not. And for example, for some people, diamonds might be useless compared. I mean, comparing their price, and what they might be not be able to get enough water for washing themselves, or even I don't know, drinking sufficient level of water. For some people, water might be used for very useless. I mean, even for shows in their gardens, maybe purposes. But all of these comparisons are done individually, and in the end, the overall way the economic system is functioning is not affected by these individual preferences or individual decision-making processes much. The key factor that is actually providing commodities at different price levels is key structure is the production, basically, according to Marx. Is it true? And I mean, can we say the consumption is completely personal, and it is not affecting the structure of the economic system? That's a big question. And well, while it might be possible to explain overall economic characteristics and also the structure and trends without looking to the consumption, consumption itself might certainly add certain elements, certain unsolved, show some new aspects of the economic system, in my opinion. And well, I will talk a little bit more on this in the next part.